Welcome to episode 232 of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to Scott Garriola, who served in the FBI for 31 years. Scott was assigned to the New Orleans division, where he worked public corruption, Italian organized crime, and drug investigations until he was transferred to the Los Angeles division, where he initially was assigned to an organized crime squad. On this episode, Scott reviews his investigation of Steve Banerjee, the owner of the Chippendales, who hired a hitman to murder his choreographer and business partner, Nick De Noia. The Chippendales are a touring dance troupe, best known for its male striptease show and for the dancers' well-chiseled chest and pectoral muscles, accented by bow ties, collars, and shirt cuffs similar to those worn by Playboy bunnies. Scott, a relatively new agent at the time, worked this international murder-for-hire case with veteran agent Andrew Stefanak, now deceased. Later in his career, Scott moved to a violent crime squad where he worked primarily fugitives or 88s. During his career, he made over 2,000 arrests and, as the lead agent, was responsible for the apprehension of 6 fugitives on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, including the infamous Boston crime boss, James Whitey Bulger. Currently, Scott works as an FBI consultant and advisor on several TV shows such as FBI, FBI Most Wanted, Clarice, and All Rise. I really enjoyed my conversation with Scott about the case and the TV technical consulting, which I started doing last year. I enjoyed that part of our conversation so much that I'm saving it for a special episode I'll be posting in August all about FBI agents working in the film and TV industry. So stay tuned for that. By the way, I include in this episode's show notes a link to an article about the new Hulu series being made about this Chippendales murder-for-hire investigation. I'll definitely be watching that. Now, before we get to the interview, I want to say hello to my newest listeners, especially those from Crime Con. Also, if you're listening to this episode on the day or day after it comes out, I will be sending out my June Reader Team email by Thursday, June 3rd. So if you don't see it in your inbox, you know what to do. Check your spam filter or promotion tab. In this month's email, I'm reviewing the movie Above Suspicion about Mark Putnam, the FBI agent who murdered his pregnant female informant. I recently spoke with the case agent, again, Jim Huggins, who I interviewed in episode 66, and I include his comments about the movie in my write-up. I also share with you several recommendations for crime-related books and podcasts. Have you noticed that there are no ads on FBI Retired Case File Review? That's because I hope you'll support the show by joining my reader team and purchasing my FBI nonfiction and crime fiction books, available wherever books are sold. There's a link to join my reader team in your podcast app's description of this episode. Once a month, I keep you up to date on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. And when you join my reader team, I'll send you my FBI reading resource, a colorful list of more than 60 books about the FBI written by FBI agents who have been guests on this podcast. And you'll also get my FBI reality checklist of 20 misconceptions about the FBI. I would also love it if you checked out the link for my books in your podcast app's description of this episode. I want to thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, Scott Garriola. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Hi, Jerry. I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. A lot of times listeners wonder, how I find my guest. And I actually learned about you because I did a review of the new hit TV show Clarice on
Right.
CBS. And one of my agent friends let me know that you were the FBI technical consultant for that. We'll have a chance to get into that at the end of the episode. But he also told me that you were the fugitive agent that found and arrested Whitey Bulger. And that's when I was like, oh, I got to talk to Scott.
Right. I was in 31 plus years. That was over 2/3 of my career. But this, what we're talking about today happened when I was a young pup agent in the early 90s. I had 4 years in tops when this case broke. But yeah, that's a whole nother, another life in my career, the fugitive world, which, I ended up to the very last day being on the job doing fugitives.
Yeah, so hopefully in a future time, we're going to be able to talk about that. But I am just as excited to talk about the case that we are going to be able to delve into today, because I have been listening to the Spotify original podcast, Welcome to Your Fantasy, about the Chippendales. And you were one of the case agents.
I would say I was the junior agent to a much more experienced older agent named Andrew Stefanak, the late, great Andrew Stefanak.
Okay, well, you worked on that case.
Oh, yeah.
And I cannot wait to hear more about it. But before we get started on your involvement, could you bring everybody up to date? Could you kind of set the scene? Who are the Chippendales?
So the Chippendales, obviously for your younger audience, is, I think they're still performing today, a male exotic dance group. Okay. They were kind of based on, as far as the costuming, based on the Playboy bunny with the collar and the cuffs. But it didn't start out that way. The actual story goes back to the mid-70s. And there was this Indian immigrant from Calcutta, I think it was Calcutta or Punjab, a man by the name of Soman Banerjee, and we'll call him Steve Banerjee, but that was his Americanized name. And he came to the United States, I believe, in the 60s, and he bought a couple of gas stations on the west side of Los Angeles. After a while, he took the money from the gas stations and he bought a club in the west side of Los Angeles on Overland Boulevard, which is kind of like a working class apartments, industrial area in West LA, not too far from the office, only a couple of miles from the LA FBI office. So Banerjee opens this club. He changes the name right away to Destiny 2. There was no Destiny 1. And he tries to make a go of being a nightclub owner. And they have a bunch of different events on each night. There's backgammon, there's female mud wrestling. But what also happens, he gets this idea to do a male strip show. And I'm just going to say it's not an exotic review like Chippendales later became, but it was like just stripping. He'd find these dancers and they'd come in and they pretty much, for women only, they'd come in and take off everything that they have down to their G-strings. Now, let me just stop and say, I've never seen the show live. I didn't get out to Los Angeles till the 80s for school, so I never saw the show. I don't know if you saw it, Jerry.
Well, I had to confess.
Okay, here we go.
No, well, I never saw the real Chippendales, but I saw a wannabe Chippendales show, probably 81, 82, just before I joined the FBI. I'm not going to out her, but I was there with my roommate who also became an FBI agent, and her initials are Jackie D. So we went there together. We had a fabulous time. I haven't been back to anything like that since, but yeah, I saw it. I enjoyed it. I understood the mystique about the Chippendales because I saw a lesser version of it, so I can only imagine how the full production was.
And I hope you declared that on your FBI background investigation, by the way. So
I was praying that they wouldn't find out about it.
And, what's funny is what you said, it's, a lesser version of the show, and that kind of plays into the story later on, and we'll get into that. So Steve Banerjee, he's got this club, Destiny 2. Well, a person comes into the club one night, this guy named Paul Schneider. Well, Paul Schneider was this is going back to the late 70s, early 80s. Paul Schneider and Dorothy Stratton were an infamous couple. They were boyfriend-girlfriend. Dorothy Stratton became the Playmate of the Year. I don't know the years It could have been 79 or 80, but it was Paul's idea for this male stripping. He had seen it up in Canada, I believe, where they were from. So that's what I think prompted Banerjee to start this male striptease show, we'll call it at this point. And eventually in the late 70s, now you're going to hear, you talk to 10 people are going to claim they had the idea to change the name of the club from Destiny 2 to Chippendales. And that was based on the very rich English furniture that's out there. I don't own any, so I don't know much about it, but that's what Chippendales is. It's this English furniture brand. The name change was made in an effort to kind of upscale the club a little bit. But it's still, when you get down to it, it was still kind of a bawdy show where guys would come on stage, take off whatever costumes they were wearing, clown costumes or whatever they were wearing, and they would strip down to the G-strings, and women would hold up dollar bills in the audience, and they would go over and they would kiss them on the lips and take the dollar bills, and then another performer would come on. It was called the tip and kiss. So around this time,
I had to interrupt to tell you that I did not participate in any type of tip and kiss.
Okay. And that's you're swearing on a stack of Bibles, I'm sure. That's okay. We'll go with that. So around this time, a man named Nick De Noia becomes made aware of the show, and he goes to the show, and him and Steve Banerjee, have this conversation about the show itself. De Noia pretty much tells him, your show is crap. I can make it much better. And De Noia's background is he was a Emmy Award-winning television producer. There was a show on in the mid-'70s. It was called Unicorn Tales. It was a kid's show, but it was dancing and choreography and singing. So De Noia won an Emmy for that. He produced on Broadway. He was actually married in the mid-'70s for a brief time to a very then famous actress named Jennifer O'Neill. And everybody my age was going to remember her from a movie called The Summer of 42. So they had a very brief marriage, but De Noia in his own right was a bona fide producer, choreographer, director. And so him and Banerjee agreed to this arrangement where De Noia would come in and he would kind of turn the show around. And that's what happened. They went from this kind of bawdy, strip show into a much more refined type of Broadway type show where there was kind of a theme. There was much more elaborate costumes. There was choreography of the dancers. It wasn't just a guy coming on stage and shaking his butt and taking his clothes off for a couple of dollar bills.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
From your point of view, I guess. Yeah. So then that's what happened. So the show became successful. But it's funny because even though, the show started making money in the early 80s, Banerjee and De Noia were, let's say, cut from the same cloth a little bit because De Noia was artistic. He was demanding. He could be an a-hole at times. And Banerjee, he was demanding too. It had to be his way or the highway. But Banerjee, he wasn't as sophisticated as De Noia. He was immigrant from India. He had an affliction of stuttering. So he wasn't very self-confident. He was all about the dollar bill. So De Noia coming in and turning the show into a success, he was on board for that, obviously. But Banerjee also had an ego, and De Noia had an ego, and they both wanted to make sure they both had the lion's share of credit for the success of the show. And so that's what happened. The show's successful, so successful that they wind up opening up a second club in New York, and they're in negotiation for opening other clubs throughout the country, maybe 5 or 6 other clubs. And then they take the show on the road. So that answers your question, what Chippendales is.
Yep.
We don't get involved in the Chippendales investigation until the summer of 1991. We actually start the case from probably the middle of the history of Chippendales. At this point, I had just transferred. I was first office in New Orleans. And my last assignment in New Orleans, I was working Italian organized crime. I took my transfer to come to Los Angeles in the summer of 91. And I wanted to get to the Italian organized crime in Los Angeles division. I was making calls, trying to get to the squad. But of course, as you know, in the FBI, you don't always get what you want. So my first month, they assigned me to an Asian organized crime, and I'm actually working Russian organized crime off that squad. Wasn't very happy. Didn't get along well with that supervisor. So about a month later, maybe 6 weeks later, I get transferred to the squad I want to be in, the old CE6. Italian organized crime squad, and I get thrown into this den of older, Hoover agents. Everybody's in their late 40s and 50s. I'm a young buck. I think I was probably 30 years old at the time. And this was about September of 1991. In fact, that's how I became acquainted with your show. You've had a couple of my old squad mates as guests on the show, Garland Schweikert, Bob Hamer. So it was just a squad of very well accomplished agents, a lot of good undercover. There's another great agent named Mike Wax on the squad who did the undercover case against the Marcello family. But I was assigned to work with the late, great Andrew Stefanak, who became like a mentor to me and, kind of like a father figure to me. He had kids my age. And what had happened was I walked into kind of like this turmoil on the squad because Stefanak tells me the story that in late July of 1991, this person who we'll call Strawberry because of the color of his hair walks into the FBI office in Las Vegas and says, I want to tell you about this plot to kill people over in London, England. The agent interviews this person, Strawberry, and Strawberry tells him, I was hired by this person named Ray Colon in Santa Clarita, California. Santa Clarita is a suburb 30 miles north of Los Angeles. Strawberry tells the agent that he wanted me to go over to London, England, and kill several members of this exotic male dance group known as the Men of Adonis. Well, it turns out the Men of Adonis was a group of male dancers that were competing with Chippendales. Not only were they competing with Chippendales, but they were also comprised of a lot of former members. So Strawberry was told to go over there and kill the lead MC of the show and also one of the tour promoters and anybody else that he could find. So if he couldn't find those two, anybody that was associated with the show. Strawberry was given a eyedropper bottle full of cyanide. He was told to go over there. He was given money for his trip. He was given a map. He was given a itinerary of this Men of Adonis tour that he was going to be touring throughout the United Kingdom. Some of the suggestion was that he had to find somebody associated with the show, wait till they go to the restroom, hit him over the head, and then inject him with the cyanide that he had in this eyedropper bottle. So that was the plan. He was sent off on his merry way. He actually went over there, Strawberry, for a couple of days. In my opinion, he got cold feet, came back. He had worked as a sometime informant for the DEA. He called his DEA handler, and he said, you better talk to the FBI about this. And that's what happened. And as any good agent would do, the agent in Las Vegas said, well, let's try and corroborate some of this. And he wanted Strawberry to get on the telephone to call this person, Ray Colon, over here in California. And that's what he did. And through a series of telephone calls, about 4 different telephone calls, Strawberry gets in touch with not only Ray Colon, but his brother-in-law who also lived at the house with Colon. On the tapes, there's conversation about, Strawberry's trying to elicit from Colon what the plot was. And every time he would say something, well, I try to find a guy to inject the cyanide, and Colon would say, don't say anything. Let's call it to knock out the dog. Refer to it as a dog. But they would do this on the telephone. So it became apparent they were trying to talk coded.
Even if you're trying to talk in code, you're not supposed to give the people listening the code words.
Right, exactly. There was significant enough conversations about the cyanide, about the trip, about who he was supposed to kill, about the method of killing. And the conversations were with both Colon and his brother-in-law. And eventually, Strawberry told Colon that he did it. He got one of the dancers or one of the people associated with the show, and he couldn't get the second one. And Colon said, well, that's okay, as long as you got one. What happens after that is the agent Vegas calls my partner Stefanak, and he tells him that these are the conversations. They listen to the tapes. Stefanak from here in Los Angeles gets a search warrant on Colon's home. They go up there and they do find the cyanide. Colon doesn't say anything at the time. He tells him he wants to cooperate, but he needs to talk to an attorney. Stefanak feels that he has this great relationship with Colon developing. So he actually goes out the next day with the agent from Vegas, and they talk to Colon again. Colon points to a piece of paper, the bottom of the paper. He says, hey, I'm down here. The people you want are up here by the top of the paper. Obviously, there's somebody above Colon who's responsible for this murder for hire plot. So Stefanak feels like that he's got this good rapport with Colon. He wants to talk to the prosecutors and see what they could come up with before they arrest Colon. Well, as luck would have it, Stefanak had this pre-planned vacation that he did every year with family and a bunch of other families and agents. And, he told the supervisor, he said, listen, I got this guy where I want him. I'll be back in a week. Give him time to think about it. He wanted to talk to an attorney. Let's see what develops. And when I come back, we'll make a decision on what to do. Well, that's not what happened. Stefanak disappears for that week on vacation. The supervisor gets a little bit nervous that, hey, we've got this person who, we have enough information on that's tried to kill somebody. What if, he tries to do it again? Or, it's too dangerous to leave him on the street. So while Stefanak's gone, he has another agent on the squad go out and get an arrest warrant. And they go up, serve the arrest warrant on Cologne and on his brother-in-law, and they arrest both of them. Needless to say, Stefanak comes back from vacation, and he's just tear-ass. He's mad at the supervisor. He's mad at the other agents on the squad, his buddies that were supposed to look out for his case while he was gone. So I get involved in this case. I walk into this turmoil on the squad, the latter part of the summer of 91. And it's just, it's just kind of very uncomfortable situation, but I'm assigned to work with Stefanak on this case. But there's not much to do. I mean, other than trying to corroborate, we've got Strawberry. We've got to kind of take care of him. We decide to put him in the witness protection program because, we've got this elaborate murder for hire plot. We don't want to make sure he doesn't get killed. We have to corroborate all this information. We got to get airline reservation, flights, hotel stuff. We got to get phone calls from Cologne's residents, all this kind of stuff that we're doing now in the fall of 1991. Cologne's locked up. His brother-in-law is locked up. There's no attempt from them to try and cooperate with us. And we can't talk to them at this point. So the case is kind of at a standstill. I remember that fall, Stefanak and I get involved in a wiretap case from New York FBI. They want us to wiretap a mob boss out here in Los Angeles who's in a federal prison. So we kind of work on that case for a while. In the meantime, we're working on corroborating as much as we can with Cologne and Strawberry part of the investigation. Well, as luck would have it, in early 1992, we get a call from a former strike force attorney. The strike force, if you remember, was this kind of independent body of prosecutors that were assigned to the local U.S. Attorney's Office. They were, I guess, developed as a means of attacking organized crime in the 80s. And so one of the strike force attorneys was a former AUSA and head of the strike force. And Cologne hires him to be his attorney. Well, he's familiar with everybody. I'm not familiar with him, but he's familiar with all the old timers on my squad because that's what they did. He's familiar with all the old timers because they were all working Italian organized crime at the time. And he says, hey, I think I can get Cologne to cooperate. What do we have? And, let's sit down and talk with the prosecutors. And we did that. And eventually what happens is Cologne comes in and decides to give a proffer. And for your audience, the proffer, Proffer, is a defendant's pretty much one chance to come in and bare his soul about everything he's done as far as criminal acts. And we can't charge him with anything that comes from his mouth, right? That's the whole deal. It's the initial stages of a plea negotiation that he's going to come in and tell you what he's done. We can't charge him with all those crimes. We can only charge him what we've independently developed. And so Cologne in February of 92 comes in and he just lays out his relationship with Banerjee and what had happened. So let me tell you a little bit about Cologne.
Before you do that, I really want to go back to what the supervisor did as far as arresting Cologne before all of this has had a chance to occur, because you never want to arrest somebody so that the people up higher know that this person has something, a reason to maybe cooperate with law enforcement. So I don't understand why in this particular case, the supervisor pulled the trigger early. Right.
Honestly, I don't know what his motivation was. I'm sure, knowing the FBI and how they operate, there was a lot of hand-wringing and hair-pulling. And, what had happened over in London is this became news. Scotland Yard had to go out and talk to these dancers and members of this Men of Adonis. So it became, as you can imagine, with the British tabloids, it kind of blew up. So there became a lot of publicity from Scotland Yard, from London, the tabloids. Headquarters obviously was made aware of our headquarters, FBI headquarters. So I could only imagine that the conversations were, okay, you have this man who hired another person to go out and kill several members of a group, and he's just, sitting up there in his house, fat, dumb, and happy, and you haven't arrested him yet? Why not? So,
Okay, that answers the question. So the field may have had additional information that can justify everything, but headquarters is the one saying, we've got international pressure or international visibility on this, and we need to make a move. And so they make that move, not necessarily for the good of the case, but the good of the reputation.
Exactly. And we'll see later on how headquarters again tries to interfere or call the shots on a case 3,000 miles away. As all your former agents listening, that happens a lot, unfortunately, from the seat of government. And so Colon comes forward, gives his proffer. A little bit of background on Colon. He's a New Yorker, like myself. He's a wannabe actor, wannabe musician. He's a military veteran who, by the way, had been convicted of a crime while he was in the military and actually got a pardon, presidential pardon. It was like a white-collar check cashing case that he actually got pardoned. So he was discharged from the military, actor, musician, writer, a reserve police officer. So he was I don't want to call him a Renaissance man, but he was a jack of all trades, for lack of a better term. This is the background of Colon. He's in his late 40s at this time. And we sit down in the prosecutor's office, myself, Stefanak, Colon, his attorney, and the two prosecutors. And he tells us this tale that how he had lived in an apartment across from Chippendales, and he became friendly with Steve Banerjee just from patronizing the club and going in and out, and confided with Banerjee. If he had asked him, he would have said, yeah, it was my idea to name the club Chippendales and to do the male exotic dancing. Everybody seems to claim credit for the idea. So Colon was somebody that developed this relationship with Banerjee, and he told us that in 1979, just as Chippendales was taking off, because this relationship with De Noia started in the late 80s, but it hadn't really developed at a point into the phenomenon that became Chippendales. So in 1979, in March, Colon was asked by Banerjee to go burn down a competing nightclub in Santa Monica, California, which was only a few miles from the club. So Colon hired a couple of guys that he had met at a 7-Eleven, and they went to this rear of this place called Moody's Discotheque, and they installed a rubber hose from a gas meter. They got a can of gasoline. They ran the hose to the back door, set it on fire, and tried to set the club on fire. Well, nothing really happened other than a burnt door, the back door of this discotheque. So Colon was paid about $7,000 by Banerjee to accomplish this. Didn't work. Colon kept on hanging out in the club, developed this relationship with Banerjee. But that's not the only time or club that Banerjee wanted burnt down. In 1984, there was this club called the Pearl Harbor, which was in the basement of this popular bar restaurant out here called the Red Onion at the time, very popular all around Los Angeles. And he wanted that place burned down as well. Now, you got to figure Chippendales at this point is kind of becoming a phenomenon, making a lot of money, but still Banerjee was very greedy, all about the dollars. And he felt that this club was taking some of his patrons. And so he, again, hired Colon to go and burn this place down. So Colon hires a different brother-in-law of his, and this brother-in-law's friend who's known as, he remembers the name as Louis. They go to this Red Onion. They make a Molotov cocktail. The people that Colon hired go down to the area where the basement window is. They throw this Molotov cocktail through the basement, and they try to set the place on fire. Fortunately, there's a janitor cleaning up after the night, and he quickly extinguishes the fire. So that's another unsuccessful job that Colon was supposed to do for Banerjee. So this all kind of mounts up with Banerjee because he's paid thousands of dollars now to Colon to accomplish 2 arsons, and neither of them happened successfully. And he wanted a few other places burned down that, according to Colon, that he checked out, but it wasn't just feasible to burn these places down. Colon, like I said, had become a reserve Palm Springs police officer from about 81 to 83. So he kind of distanced himself from Banerjee during that time. They do the arson in 84. About 1986, Colon tells us that Banerjee came to him and said that he wanted this person in New York killed. And it turns out the person in New York killed was Nick De Noia, Banerjee's partner. The reason being, what was going on at that time was Banerjee and De Noia in about 84 had settled on an arrangement because the two of them really couldn't work. There were two A-type personalities that could not work together reasonably. They would just butt heads all the time. There were screaming matches. So De Noia decided that he would run the New York club that opened kind of around that time, 83, 84. They signed this deal, which I guess everybody claims it was signed on a napkin. Everybody I ever interviewed said the deal initially was signed on a napkin before it was more formally memorialized. And the deal was that De Noia would have the touring rights to Chippendales in perpetuity, which, as we know, means forever. So De Noia was running the New York club. De Noia had the touring rights to the Chippendales male dancers. Banerjee was running the LA club, and they were supposed to split the profits. Well, Banerjee didn't trust De Noia. In the 80s, 86, Banerjee had put out a calendar for the 1987 the Chippendales dance calendar, which was very popular, made millions of dollars in the 80s. Well, this year, 1987, the calendar comes out and it has 31 days in the month of February. So before it actually hits the stand, so they have to recall it, and that's like a $700,000, $800,000, nearly $1 million loss Banerjee suffers. In addition, there's a lot of trip and fall lawsuits in the club. In the way the club operated, the women would be in there. Hundreds of women would be in this club that was probably only held about 150. So they would let a couple of hundred women in violation of the fire department rules. And so the fire department was constantly closing them down. There was, like I said, trip and fall lawsuits. There was this calendar issue. There was actually a discrimination lawsuit. What they were doing is, at Banerjee's behest, the bouncers were not letting in any African-American men. So all this was going on, and a lot of bad publicity, so much so that around this time, Banerjee was forced to declare bankruptcy. So Banerjee seeks out Cologne and says that De Noia is literally killing him in business financially. He's stealing from him. He's not sharing the profits. He's got this touring rights to the show, which became the most lucrative part of Chippendales. The ability to take the dancers on the road from city to city and then eventually from country to country and just make millions. And that's what was going on. Banerjee didn't even know what the word in perpetuity meant, and he didn't realize that he has signed these rights to De Noia forever, and he can never really get the rights back ever. They were supposed to share in the profits, but Banerjee believed that he was getting cheated, which there was no indication that De Noia was cheating him. It was just two titans clashing. So Banerjee asked Cologne, I need you to do this for me. And Banerjee kept on pressuring Cologne. He said, you owe me thousands of dollars from these failed arsons. He said, if you don't do it, I'm going to have my mafia friends do this for you. And Claude said, well, why don't you just have them? Why don't you have the mafia friends of yours do the hit? That's what they're good at. And Banerjee would tell Cologne that I can't have them do it because if I had them do it, they're going to own me and they're going to own my club. I need you to do it for me. He actually showed Cologne a letter that when you appear on a wiretap conversation, you get notified by the government that your conversation was intercepted. So Banerjee actually was in conversations at some point with this mob guy out here, a guy who came to be known as Harry Leonard. His real name was Salvatore Giglio. He was a New York member of the Bonanno family. The conversation between the two of them was intercepted, so the FBI notified Banerjee that he was talking to this person and this conversation was recorded. So he shows that to Cologne and said, look, see, I have mob friends and I can get you killed as well. But Banerjee would switch tactics with Cologne. He said, I'll give you anything you want. I'll buy you a house. I'll do anything for you, but you got to get this done. So he pressures Cologne to do this. I don't know how you pressure someone to kill another person, but he pressures Cologne to do this. He gives Cologne $500 to buy a couple of weapons. Cologne goes to New York a couple of times. He checks out the location. Cologne says he did that as much as he could to stall Banerjee. He really didn't want to do this. Cologne had family in New York. He'd visit the family, but he actually would go and scout out where De Noia lived, where De Noia worked, and he would report back to Banerjee as if he was, on the job doing something. Finally, Banerjee pressures so much Cologne that Cologne hires this individual named Louis, who we learned about earlier in the Red Onion arson from 1984. He tracks Louis down and tells him, we have to go to kill this guy. I'm going to pay you $25,000. And that's what Banerjee had told Cologne he would pay. The two of them, Cologne and Louis, fly to New York. April 6, 1987, they take a red eye. So almost 34 years ago this week, they fly to New York on a red eye. They get to New York the morning of April 7th, 1987. Before they left, Louis was a heroin addict. They had to get some heroin for Louis, a bunch of balloons full of heroin. So he bring it on the trip with them. They land in New York. They drive into the city. They know where De Noia works, where his office is. His Chippendales office is in New York. It's right by the Port Authority bus terminal in New York. They head over there. They get some wine for Louis. They stop at a Burger King. They get something to eat. And Louis tells Colon, I'm going to go check it out. Well, De Noia's office was on the 15th floor of a building. I think it was 43rd Street. And Louis goes up there, comes back down. He sees Colon, and he tells Colon that I saw you from upstairs on the 15th floor. Give me the guns. I'm going to go check it out. So Colon's trying to stall him, according to Colon, of course. He gives him one of the guns. Colon waits by the Burger King. Rivera goes upstairs, and he walks into this office where De Noia has his office. In the front part of the office is another gentleman. Let's call him a secretary for lack of a better word. I don't think he was actually a secretary, but let's just call him that. He asks, are you Nick De Noia? He says no. He points to the inner office. Louis goes into the bathroom down the hall, and he's washing his face. And as he's washing his face in the rearview mirror, he sees this secretary come into the men's room. He realizes that this is his opportunity. He leaves the bathroom, goes into the office, walks into De Noia's inner office, and looks at him and says, are you Nick De Noia? And De Noia looks up, he smiles at him, and Louis pulls out a gun, shoots him one time in the face, and kills him right there. He runs down the 15 flights. They hops in the car with Colon. They take off. Colon says he's so lost he can't remember even how to get out of the city. He actually winds up driving right back past the crime scene because he's all turned around. He sees the ambulances and the squad cars arriving. They head out to Long Island. He puts Louis in a hotel for the night. The next morning, they leave Los Angeles, return to Los Angeles. Banerjee meets Colon at the back of a restaurant in Los Angeles. He hands Colon $12,500, which is only half the payment. And that's the kind of person Banerjee was, right? You think you would have the full $25,000 for the hitman that just killed the person you wanted to hit. But he doesn't have it. He only has $12,500. There's an argument, of course, between Colon and Banerjee. Colon goes back, gives the money to Louis. Colon thinks now Louis is going to kill him because he's only got half of what he was promised. But Colon smartly took the guns from Louis after the murder and hit him. So, and that's it. And that's how that murder happens. And then eventually Colon gets the other half of the money, finds Louis, gives him the money. They're done. The two of them are done in 1987. Banerjee and Colon are pretty much done until about 1990.
Well, hold on. At this point in 1987, Nick is killed.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any idea of who did it or what happened? I mean, what goes on between 1987 and 1990 as far as the murder case?
Right. So from the NYPD investigation, they go out and they arrest somebody that they think is responsible for the murder. I think it was maybe an ex-lover of De Noia's or something like that. He's immediately released. There's no evidence on him. Everybody that you talk to, De Noia's brothers, anybody involved with Chippendales points the finger at Banerjee. Banerjee's in Los Angeles. NYPD, they don't make any attempt to go out and see Banerjee. They call him on the phone. He pretty much says, I don't know anything about it, and that's the end of the conversation. And that's where the case stands from 1987 on. And it's an unsolved murder. Everybody involved in the Chippendales world suspects Banerjee just because they know the type of person Banerjee is, that he's a hothead, and that there was such a horrible relationship between the two. He's the main suspect in everybody else's mind, but NYPD can't put the pieces together. So in 1990, Banerjee again reaches out for Colon. At this point, Colon is doing his writing, his acting, his singing. He actually runs a traffic school. For those of you in other parts of the country, a traffic school is where you get a moving violation, a ticket. And instead of it going on your insurance, you spend a 4 or 8 hour course in this traffic school one day, one Saturday or Sunday, and you get a certificate saying that you've been re-educated, I guess, on the proper rules of the road. And so the ticket does not go on your license. You don't get a point on your license, and you don't get insurance. So Ray's doing that, making money, doing odd jobs. Banerjee seeks out Colon again. He tells him that he wants this doctor killed and his 12-year-old son. And he gives Colon some money to go check this out because this doctor who's also an Indian native, and Banerjee were involved in this business deal to create a major club down in downtown Los Angeles that was going to be known as Adult Disneyland. They were going to have each floor, 5 different floors was going to have a different theme. There was going to be a rock theme. There was going to be the Chippendales theme. There was going to be a country western. And that was the plan. And at this point, all the Chippendales clubs have closed. The New York club is closed out of business. The LA club has been closed down in the late 80s for a number of reasons. And so all they have is the touring rights, which Banerjee had purchased back from De Noia's family for about $1 million. After the murder, De Noia's family sold the touring rights back to Banerjee for $1 million. So Banerjee is now running this lucrative touring company of Chippendales.
The family did that even though he was suspected to be behind the killing of Nick?
Yep, they did. Kind of a head-scratching moment, but they did. They sold it back. The family, they were not involved in the entertainment world. Nick was the only one involved in the entertainment world. They had no idea how to run this business. They didn't want to run the business. And so when Banerjee made him this offer, they said, we might as well sell it to him. Right? There was the NYPD investigation was going nowhere, so that they sold it back. I don't want to second guess what they did, but that's what happened. So Banerjee's running Chippendales tours all over the world at this time, not just in the United States, but they're touring all over Europe. Very popular, very lucrative. But Banerjee's other deal is with this doctor, a medical doctor, and he wanted to do this, open this club in Los Angeles. Banerjee was not very business savvy, as we knew from the deal with De Noia. So there was some kind of deal with this doctor where the doctor wound up getting the better of Banerjee on the deal. And I guess it irritated him, pissed him off enough where he wanted Cologne to go and kill the doctor. Not only the doctor, but his 12-year-old son. So that was Cologne's next job. And Cologne told me, he was very hesitant about doing it, especially killing a 12-year-old son. He was not going to do it. He was leading Banerjee along. Eventually, Banerjee told him that, okay, don't do the doctor. I want you to kill this choreographer who left my dance group and went and opened up this Men of Adonis dance group. So there was a defection from Banerjee's Chippendale show to this group called Men of Adonis in the early 90s. A choreographer, an MC, one of the tour promoters, they all left, and they all left Banerjee's employ and went to work for this Men of Adonis, a competing rival dance group. As you can imagine, they couldn't stand working for Banerjee in that environment, and they decided to go out on their own. That pissed Banerjee off. So now Banerjee tells Cologne, okay, he solicits another murder, kill this choreographer. And then Cologne again checks this out. And all the time, Banerjee's paying him money. I don't know the exact figures, 1,000 here, a couple of thousand there. And according to Cologne, he was just stringing Banerjee along. Banerjee eventually tells Cologne that, no, don't worry about him. He's got AIDS, and eventually this choreographer did wind up dying of AIDS. So Banerjee says, don't worry about him. I want you to kill the MC and the tour promoter for the Men of Adonis. And he said, they're over in Canada right now. Send somebody over to Canada to find him. Cologne sends his brother-in-law up to Canada. Actually, the two of them go up to Canada. They have a itinerary of the Men of Adonis where they're touring throughout the United States, and they were supposed to be in Canada running a show. Cologne and his brother-in-law can't get in because of the border crossing. It's late at night. But in the meantime, he's calling Banerjee off from the road saying, hey, this is where we're at. We're here in Maine. We're here in New York. We're trying to check it out. It's unsuccessful. They don't wind up finding them in Canada. They can't get in there. He goes back to Los Angeles, and Banerjee again puts the pressure on Cologne to find these two members of the troupe. At this point, they're in London. So Cologne sends his brother-in-law to London. Brother-in-law, according to him, doesn't know why he's doing this. He's just going to go check out the show in London. He goes there. Cologne is saying he's stalling Banerjee by doing this, but eventually Banerjee pressures him to getting the job done. And he hires this individual, this friend of his, that Cologne hires this guy, Strawberry. And Strawberry goes to Cologne's house, and he accepts the contract to go kill these people in London. It's $25,000 each to kill the MC and to kill the tour promoter. They mix cyanide in the garage, the three of them, the Cologne, Strawberry, and the brother-in-law. They mix cyanide in the garage. He gives it to him in a little eye drop bottle, and he sends Strawberry to London with the map, with the itinerary of the show, reservations, airline tickets, sends him over there in early July. He goes over there, gets cold feet, and he comes back to Las Vegas, where he goes in, he tells the FBI in Las Vegas about this story. Now we've come full circle. So Cologne has dropped these bombshells on us during this proffer at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We kind of suspected that Banerjee was behind the 1991 conspiracy to kill the men of Adonis, right? Because who else is going to kill a competing dance group? The intended victims, they told Scotland Yard, there's only one person that could be behind this, and this is Steve Banerjee. He wanted us dead, I'm sure. So that part we suspected. The 87 murder, the arsons, we had no idea. And we could only prove those with Ray's testimony. So it was our job at this time to try and corroborate as much of the story as Ray told us. As you can imagine, we went and got fire department reports, police reports, try to corroborate phone calls and airline reservations and all this stuff. And what we needed to do, we needed to find out who this person Louis was, because Cologne didn't know who he was. And we knew who Banerjee was, obviously, because Banerjee had been intercepted on our wiretap. Stefanak, my partner, had actually interviewed Banerjee earlier about his involvement with organized crime because he claimed he was being extorted by the mafia in New York and out here by organized crime members regarding his clubs. So Stefanak knew Banerjee personally. We decided we're going to get Cologne out of the federal detention center, daily furlough, so he could drive us around Los Angeles and try and establish and corroborate as much of his story in the view of getting a plea agreement with him that he would cooperate with us against Banerjee and against Louis. So that's what we did. Maybe half a dozen times between February and May of 92, we got Cologne out of the detention center. One of these times, he took us past this house where he knew Louis lived. And so now at least we had an address and we could work backwards from the address to try and identify who this Louis was. We're sitting at a restaurant, Italian restaurant in Santa Monica one day. My back is to the wall. Stefanak's to my right. I'm looking at Cologne. We're just talking, and Cologne looks up, and it's typical in a lot of California, Los Angeles restaurants, there's 8x10s of actors on the wall. Well, Cologne looks up at one of those 8x10s. He says, "Hey, I know that guy up there on the wall." And I turn around, I look, and I point. I said, "This guy here?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "How do you know him?" He goes, "I take acting lessons from him. He's a cool guy." Turns out that's my brother. So Cologne actually knew my brother. So it's just kind of a crazy,
weird kind of moment,
weird thing. And so I tell him, I said, that's my brother, But what that does, I think, at least in my mind, it kind of forges this relationship that we have with Cologne. We're trying to establish a rapport with him. We're trying to, evaluate his trustworthiness. And I think it kind of establishes a little bit of a bond with us. He liked my brother. Stefanak and I are beginning to trust him. He's beginning to trust us. We're taking him to lunch. He's working with us. And all this time, everything he's telling us is kind of panning out. We're able to identify who Louis is based on him showing us this address. And so, we decided to come up with a plan that Cologne has this terminal disease called systolic kidney. And it's just something hereditary in the family. And everybody in the family winds up dying from it. And you develop cysts on your kidneys. So Cologne knew that he was living on borrowed time. Most of the men in his family wound up dying in their 50s. Cologne was in his late 40s. And I think that was part of the impetus for him to cooperate with us. He was facing 10 years on that murder for hire charge, probably die in prison. So that, along with the relationship he established with Stefanak and I, kind of think led to his cooperation. So we decided that we were going to get him out on a ruse called a medical furlough. He was so ill that he was going to bail out, put up his house for bail, and that he would stay under a GPS monitoring device in his house while his case was going to trial. So that was a ruse we got him out in. And that ruse was solely intended for Banerjee, because Banerjee had known that Cologne was arrested. We figured that we had to come up with some kind of reason for Banerjee to trust him again. What I didn't tell you was that from August of 91 to February of 92, Cologne told us that Banerjee had given him probably $150,000 delivered in cash to a friend of Cologne's who owned a bar in West Los Angeles. That money, let's call it hush money, right? That's basically what it was. Cologne had told him in a series of letters that Cologne had delivered to Banerjee. He wouldn't talk to Banerjee on the phone. Banerjee wouldn't talk to him on the phone. But he had other inmates at the detention center. He would write the letters. They would send them to the family on the outside, and they would hand deliver them to Banerjee. So about $150,000 had since 91 to early 92 been delivered on Banerjee's behalf to Cologne. And he was using that money to pay for these lawyers.
And this was before or during the time that he was cooperating with you?
about 150,000 before. Eventually, it comes out to about 225,000 as we get involved in the case. So Cologne has his money. That's how he's able to hire a private defense attorney that eventually leads to his cooperation.
At first, I was thinking this could hurt your case, but really it corroborates your case again. Because why is Steve paying him if the allegations that he's making are not true?
Exactly. Basically, that's what it is. It's just hush money. But, the thing with Banerjee, and this plays out later on, is that he's very paranoid, but he so wants to be assured by Cologne that Cologne's not cooperating. He knows Cologne was arrested. He eventually finds out that Cologne had a plea deal with the government. I guess that's on us in the prosecutor's office that it's sealed, but he pays an attorney to go to court, and he finds out that there's a sealed plea agreement between Cologne and the government. But still, in May of 1992, we get Cologne out of jail on what we tell Banerjee is a medical furlough. We have Cologne sending him a letter right before he's released that, hey, I'm not doing well medically. They're going to release me on this medical furlough. I'm only going to be able to see my lawyer and my doctors. So May 92, Cologne gets out. Stefanak and I pick him up from the detention center, and we're driving him home to his house. He's in the back seat. I'm in the front passenger seat. Stefanak's driving. Stupid or ballsy move next. I reach down to my ankle, and I have a 5-shot on my ankle, Jerry. And I reach down, I tell him, I hand it back to Ray. I said, Ray, if you're going to F with Stefanak and I and turn on us, run on us, or do whatever, I said, you might as well just kill us both now. I said, I've got 3 years on. You're going to ruin my career. Stefanak's retirement age. You're going to screw both of us. I said, take the gun and just put bullets in the back of our head right now. He said, you're stupid. He goes, I'm with you guys 100%. I want to get this guy. I don't have much longer to live. So I want to get this guy, stupid, ballsy move. My wife says it was stupid. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the pressure that you were feeling that made you do this, whether it's ballsy or stupid, make this move. I mean, the kind of pressure, you're getting somebody who has confessed that he was involved in a murder for hire, and you are getting him released from detention to walk free on the street. So talk about that.
Okay, so part of the deal was we had to put a GPS ankle monitor on him at his house, right? That was, headquarters didn't want that. Headquarters, again, says, no, you have to lock him up every night. And we had a good relationship at that time with the Beverly Hills jail from working other cases. So, okay, that was a possibility. We're going to lock him up, run around during the day, try and find Louis, try and find Banerjee, get him, to cooperate with us, get him on tape to corroborate Cologne. But that, honestly, how's that going to work? We told Banerjee that, okay, I'm out on a medical furlough. What if Banerjee shows up at his house one night and says, well, where is he? He's supposed to be here, So we felt like there's no way we're going to be able to work this case with Cologne locked up on a nightly basis and just run around during the day with him. So what we told headquarters and told our supervisors was, okay, we'll put a GPS ankle monitor on him, and that will be, it'll be in our custody. Whether it's our actual physical custody or our constructive custody, as is a legal term, right? So yeah, he was in our constructive custody. Stefanak didn't live too far away from him. We had a GPS ankle monitor on him. I felt that we had a great relationship with him. He knew my brother. We had been now dealing with him for 3 months, probably a dozen times, met with him, talked to him on the phone. I really felt like in my 3-year or 4-year investigative knowledge at that time that he was 100% on board with us. And so did Stefanak. And Stefanak at this point was, a 25-year agent, seasoned veteran. So we both thought that this was the right course of action. And that's what we did. Well, wouldn't you know, the very first night we put him in his house, the GPS ankle monitor has some kind of geofence around it where if you go past this imaginary fence, it's going to send an alert. And that's what had happened. And so Stefanak, like in the middle of the night, races to Cologne's house, banging on the door. And Cologne, bleary-eyed, sleeping, says, what are you doing? So, he says, the ankle monitor went off and said you had left the perimeter of the house. So no, I've been here. I'm sleeping. So we realized even the GPS ankle monitor was, so we just discarded that. We told headquarters that, hey, this is what we're doing. We're locking them up every night and we got the ankle monitor. None of that was true. But that's the only way we're going to make the case. So Here we are, May in 92. We have this person named Louis Rivera. Turns out is his last name, which is not really his full last name. So we had him partially identified. And we have Banerjee, and we're trying to now send Cologne, who's out of custody, in to meet with Louis and then to meet with Banerjee. Well, Banerjee, as you can imagine, is cagey. He's not taking Cologne's calls at the office. He's not responding to any of the letters that we've sent him. We had an FBI agent undercover deliver a couple of letters to the Chippendales office here in West Los Angeles. There was no response. Finally, we decide to force the issue. We wire Ray up and we send him to wait for Banerjee one morning as he's going to work on a street corner. And that's what he does. Ray takes his position. He sees Banerjee arrive at work. He yells for him, motions for him to come across the street. Banerjee comes over. They have a brief conversation, which you can really not even hear because Banerjee doesn't say much. He looks at Ray up and down. He thinks Ray's wired. Ray lifts his shirt up and it shows him he's not wired. They talk about getting more money and very brief conversation. Don't record anything on tape. And Banerjee goes back to the office. If you remember back then, Jerry, and for your audience, our recording devices were not very stealthy at the time. Pretty big, pretty obvious and hard to kind of secrete on a person.
So is this the Nagra?
The Nagra. This was the mini Nagra at the time, which was the smaller version of the Nagras at the time. Probably the length of an iPhone, maybe it was a little shorter than an iPhone. This tailor I knew here, I had him sew a pocket into the crotch area of Ray's shorts. And then, we had to have a couple of microphones, of course, that come from the recording device. And we kind of put them through the seams and underneath the waistband, Velcroed them. And so it was a pretty good job at, secreting the microphones. But Banerjee was too cagey. He didn't want to talk. But the next day, he tells Ray he's going to send him more money. We know where the money's going. It's this bar in West LA. And so we set up a surveillance the next day. And sure enough, we observed Banerjee driving past this bar. And he's writing something down. And then about an hour later, a package arrives at the bar and it has $20,000 cash in it. I go in, I retrieve the money from the bar owner. It's just, again, more corroboration, more hush money. What we really need is we need to get Banerjee on tape. So that's what we really need. Simultaneously, we're working the second prong of the investigation, try and find out who this Louis Rivera is. So we send Cologne to this house that he had previously identified for us, and Rivera's brothers, Andy, is there, Andy Rivera. He won't tell us anything about Louis. Louis's not around, blah, blah, blah. He tries to get some money out of Ray. Ray tells Rivera, well, I've got another job for your brother. The brother Rivera indicates that he knows what happened for the other job, meaning the murder, but he won't give us any information about where Louis is. But he winds up, taking $100 from us here and there. Cologne has to buy him lunch so we can develop this relationship with Andy so we can get at his brother Louis. Eventually, Andy says, well, write a letter and I'll put it in code and I'll send it to him. Eventually, we find out, we get a letter back and Louis Rivera is locked up in state prison for narcotics charges. This is the summer of 92. And now we've first established firsthand direct contact between Louis Rivera, whose real name is Gilberto Lopez Rivera, a.k.a. Louis. But he's locked up in our state prison about 75 miles from our office. Now we have a written correspondence going back and forth between Rivera and Cologne. And the reason that we come up with that Cologne is now reaching out for Rivera, remember, it's been 4 years since they had anything to do with each other, since the murder. So we tell Rivera that another job has to be done in New York. The witness that was left alive in the outer office, this person that Rivera first approached, that they crossed paths in the bathroom, that person needs to be killed because that person is now extorting the boss of the company, meaning Banerjee, but Rivera doesn't know who the boss is, or just he knows there's a company behind all these plots. So we need this person killed in New York because he's a witness, number one, and two, he's extorting our boss. So that's what we come up with. So the plan is to get Rivera to put Cologne on his visitors list so we could actually have a face-to-face conversation in the state prison where we can try and record it. We work on this during the summer. We also work on Banerjee to try and get Banerjee on tape. We have another meeting with Banerjee. There's phone calls back and forth. Banerjee says, okay, meet me at this Best Western Hotel on June 23rd, 1992. So we send Cologne into this meeting at this Best Western. He's wired. They go in there. Banerjee shows up. Come to find out, what happens is Banerjee takes Cologne into the men's room and he strip searches, looking for a recording device. Ray strips down to his underwear, right? And he says, "Are you satisfied? I'm not wearing anything." He says, "You pull your shirt," tells Banerjee, "You pull your shirt up." And Ray tries to reassure Banerjee as much as possible that he's not cooperating. But Banerjee still won't talk to him. What he does is he doesn't talk. He writes a bunch of notes on a sticky note. He gives them to Ray, and he won't let Ray talk. So they're communicating in the bathroom via sticky notes. Eventually, Banerjee rips up the sticky notes, flushes them in the toilet. They go out to the lobby of the hotel. They sit there with an open briefcase. Banerjee's writing notes on a piece of paper. Ray would try to talk. Banerjee would shush him, and he would write questions and get answers from Ray. Do they know about the D, meaning the De Noia murder? And Ray would just tell him, "You're crazy. I'm with you 100%. I'm not cooperating with the government. They don't know anything about it. They never even asked me about it." So this meeting goes on for about an hour and a half. They eventually leave. They go to the trunk of the car. Banerjee hands Cologne a package. We meet Cologne after the meeting. He says, "Here's a package." He says there's $4,000 in it. And he tells us, he says, he wouldn't talk to me. He says he took the sticky notes at the end of the meeting, ripped them up, flushed them in the toilet. I go back into the Best Western, go into the toilet. Sure enough, I find some sticky notes that never made it into the commode. I grab them as evidence. So there's some writing on it, but you really can't make it out. And we go back to the office and, we debrief Ray, get as much information about the conversation. We had told Ray at that meeting, said, "Hey, if he won't talk to you in these meetings," I said, "tell him that maybe we can meet overseas somewhere." Because we had come up with, Stefanak and I come up with a plan that, hey, if he's not going to talk to us, if he's going to be this cagey in the United States, maybe he would come through and talk to us if we made Ray turn out to be a fugitive. And that's the kind of the plan that we developed with Ray, that, hey, introduce this at the meeting, that you may go on the run because you're not going to die in prison. You're facing 10 years. You're not going to die in prison. And your only hope is to go on the run and for Steve to support you while you're on the run. So that was June 23rd, 1992. We open up the package. There's not $4,000 in there. There's $40,000 cash in that package. What are we going to do? We can't get Banerjee to talk on tape. We send a few more letters to him. Eventually in September, our plan was fully developed that we're going to take Ray as a fake fugitive overseas, and that he needs to force this issue at this next and final meeting with Banerjee, that this is what's going to happen. He's going to go over to Italy, and that Banerjee is going to come meet him over there. And this was the key. Banerjee told Ray that if you go over to Italy or you go over to Europe, I'll talk all you want. And it was that line, that "I'll talk all you want," that we were able to convince headquarters to let us do this.
I can only imagine how difficult that was. You say that like we were able to convince headquarters, but I mean, this was the same headquarters that demanded that you make an arrest and put Cologne in jail before you have gotten his cooperation. And now you're trying to convince them, this person that you've taken out of detention, to work with you. Now you're going to take him overseas.
Yeah, we're gonna bring a admitted confessed killer overseas to a foreign country where we actually have no authority or jurisdiction over him, right? I mean, he's, I have no authority, and no FBI agent really has jurisdiction.
Yeah,
outside the United States.
Yeah, and now you're going to be wanting to make recordings. I mean, I take it you don't even know if that's legal in the country that you're taking him to. There's a lot of work that you have to do before you can even set this up.
Yeah, well, that's why nothing happened. This is September of 92. Nothing really happened till February of 93. You could imagine the convincing and, again, the hand-wringing. And, you have to send a request to our legat in Rome that, hey, is this possible? Can this be done? And, what we did was, in our communications to Rome, we had to play up this, the mafia angle. And not that there wasn't any mafia connection, because we, come to find out that this Harry Leonard character was probably a silent partner involved in Chippendales. If I had to guess, it was probably his idea maybe to kill De Noia. We eventually interviewed him, and of course, we're in his fig garden in his house in Santa Monica. As he's giving us figs to eat, he's denying everything, right? But, when you look at it from 30,000 feet, there definitely is a mafia connection in this case. How much and, to what extent? Well, we had to play up that angle because Italy is known for their organized crime connections and the mafia family. So that's what we played it up to the league at. They played it up to the Italian police. They eventually conceded that and agreed that we could accomplish this. We got an agreement to do recordings over there. And so that was the plan we put in place. There was the final meeting, September of 92, between Cologne and Banerjee. We didn't record this one. We didn't want to risk the possibility of Banerjee finding the recording device this time. We had been lucky twice before, so we didn't want to risk it a third time. We actually lost Cologne during this meeting. He was supposed to be picked up by Banerjee at a supermarket parking lot in Santa Monica, and then he picked him up, and then we tried to follow him. We actually lost him. They wound up going to a beach restaurant and having lunch. Banerjee told him, well, why don't you go to India and get plastic surgery? And, I can take care of you. You can live like a king in India. And Cologne told him, he says, I go to India, you're going to kill me on the operating table. There's no way I'm going to India. I'm going to Italy. My family's a part Italian. I can get along in Italy. So that was the plan. And that's what we had set in motion. Simultaneously, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the actual hitman, the killer, on tape. And this took a series of, and this is Louis Rivera, who's locked up in the Norco State Prison out here, a series of phone calls, a series of letters. And again, Louis is trying to squeeze as much as Ray out of him as possible. He thinks Ray's wealthy and has money. So he's getting Ray Cologne to send Father's Day presents and Mother's Day presents to his family. Can you send me a Sony Walkman so you can play music? Can you send this to my girlfriend? Give me a subscription to the LA Times. And so every time he asks for a favor, what do we have to do? We have to agree to do it because, we're trying to get back in his good graces and get him on tape.
And who's paying for all of that?
Uncle Sam's paying for it. We're blue slipping everything. And, I'm giving him money. And, the old voucher system, the blue slip, we're getting all this, supervisor shaking his head every time he signs something, right? So eventually we get a meeting, I believe it was October 1st of 92. We get a meeting in the state prison with Cologne and Rivera. Now you can imagine trying to get somebody through metal detectors into a state prison. We're going to have to somehow rely on somebody trustworthy in that state prison to allow us in there with a recording device on, because we have to get this conversation on tape. So we find somebody in the investigative unit of the prison. We get them to allow us in there. What happens is they have to shut the actual magnetometer off as Cologne passes through. And that's what they do. Stefanak and I wind up going into a room and we're going to listen to this conversation. Well, as luck would have it, we're all in the prison. There's a problem with the count. And we only have about 2.5 hours on that mini Nagra recording device. Well, this problem with the count, the inmate count, the population, if there's not an exact count during visiting hours, they lock the place down. And sure enough, that's what they did. They locked the place down. We're waiting and waiting and waiting. And eventually they have their meeting. But because of the count problem, they only have like a half hour to talk. So the meeting is rushed. Rivera is suspicious at best. Cologne lays out the plan. You left a witness alive. This witness is now extorting my boss. We have to get to him. He said, when are you getting out? Well, I'm getting out early 1993. Okay, when you get out, we're going to take care of this guy. Not much in the way of a good conversation, right? So we have to eventually get him in again. Well, from October of 92 till about December of 92, we don't hear squat from Rivera. There's no phone call. The letters are going unanswered. We figured we're burned, that somehow we got compromised at the prison. And we're kind of bummed about that part, to say the least. Miraculously, early December of 92, Rivera recontacts as a phone call. And Ray says, hey, man, I got to come see you. We got to get this done. You're getting out 2 months. So let's talk. We set it up again. Early December, we set up a meeting. We drive out there. Like I said, it's probably about an hour and a half drive from our office to the state prison. We get out there. Now we have a transmitter on him and we have a recording device on him. I'm listening from a room adjacent to this little courtyard where they're visiting, and I'm hearing these great conversations between them talking about the murder and how they went to New York, and Ray's doing a great job getting it on tape, right? We leave. We're kind of happy. I go back to the office. I play the recording. What he had done was he had recorded our conversation from the office to the state prison, which was about an hour and a half, and all of it, which we couldn't use, obviously, because he just Cologne is just railing against the prosecutor, how they were out to get him, the judge, and all this was unusable. Expletives flying back and forth. You can imagine the conversation between Cologne, myself, and Stefanak in the car. And none of it's usable, and none of this good stuff that I had heard and took notes on was on the tape.
Wow. Oops.
Oops, a big oops. So we're pissed. Stefanak and I, the next day, go to Cologne's house. We pull him outside the house, and we just tear into him. You did this on purpose. Effing with us. You're trying to sabotage the investigation. Cologne's obviously visibly upset. He said, you would remember, Jerry, the Niagara, in order to turn these things on, it was like a little switch by your thumb that you would flip on and flip off. And, if you flipped it one way, didn't remember, you could imagine it happening. And we gave him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, I took notes. I memorialized it, but still it's, my testimony of what I overheard, right? The best evidence is someone confessing or admitting on tape to what he did. So that's the best evidence. So what do? Hey, bro, I got to come see you again. And we got to finalize these plans. You're getting out in a couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about everything. So Rivera says, okay, come see me again. So we show up on Christmas Eve, 1992, and we go out there again. Now, I've got 2 recording devices on him this time and a transmitter. We're not going to blow this one, right? How many times can we go in and talk about this thing? And the thing that we're running up against is he's going to be released from prison in about a month. And what are we going to do once he gets released? We told him he has to go murder somebody. He's going to be looking for another $25,000 payday. But luckily, Ray goes in there, meets with Rivera, and it's beautiful. On tape, he admits to everything. He tells about how he went up. He went in the room. He saw the secretary. He went in the bathroom, and he went back into De Noia's office. He asked if he was De Noia. He said yes. And he's pulled a gun up, and he said the whole face just changed, and he shot him once in the face. And the line that sealed the deal was, he said, I saw the red dot on his face. And Cologne says, what do you mean a red dot on his face? He says, that's where the bullet went in. And that was it. That's all we needed for him. And they talked more about how he came down and he ran down the stairs, and Cologne saw that he was huffing and puffing. His stomach was going in and out, and how they went out to the hotel, and how, he told Rivera, don't make any phone calls from this motel room this night. And sure enough, Rivera made some very crucial phone calls from his motel room back to Los Angeles to his friends and family that we were able to secure those to corroborate the story even more. Tape recording was great. I overheard it again. So we had Rivera, but we had a problem. And the problem was Rivera was going to get out of jail in January of 1993. Fortunately, Rivera had been a twice deported illegal alien. I was able to call a buddy at immigration. And what they did was, to buy us some time, they filed a federal charge on him for illegal reentry after deportation. And that's a federal statute. It's a 5-year prison sentence. Like I said, he had twice entered the country after being deported. That bought us time. We had exactly what we needed as far as from the hitman. We had a great conversation on tape. It was audible. It was perfect. We had him on ice, so we didn't have to worry about him. There was future conversations where, we had Rivera calling Cologne, and Cologne saying, well, hey, dude, you're locked up. I'm going to have to find somebody else. And this way we could at least cut off the gravy train. We didn't have to give him any more money or buy any more presents for his family. So we put that to bed. Now we had to work on Banerjee, getting Banerjee overseas on tape. So we set it up, and myself, Stefanak, a tech agent, and Cologne were going to go to Rome. I left in February of 93. I left a week early to go meet with the legal attaché or FBI representative in Rome, where we had to set up an apartment for Cologne because he was going to have, at that point, he had fled to Italy. We had to set up recording devices, but we brought a tech agent with us because we weren't sure of the capabilities of the Italians. So we wanted to bring somebody from our office that could actually record conversations and wire up rooms and things like that. So I arranged all this for about a week, had meetings, and this is what we're going to do. And we had this apartment secured, and we're going to wire it up as soon as our team gets here. And then we're going to try and lure Banerjee over there. The Italians were very concerned with security. They were going to have round-the-clock security on Cologne because they were worried about the mafia coming to kill him, all this kind of stuff. So that's what we did. About a week later, Stefanak, Cologne, and our tech agent arrive in Rome. And now we begin the process of trying to get Banerjee on tape, on a phone call, and then lure him to Europe. And what does he do? He won't take our phone calls. We have to call him at a hotel in Santa Monica. He won't take any phone calls at his office. We call him at the hotel. He says, send me a fax to my office. Tell me you want to invest in the tour. You want to bring the tour over to Italy. This way I have a legitimate reason to come over there. Europe. He says, say Europe. He doesn't say Italy. Well, you can imagine we're making these phone calls with about a 9-hour time difference. And it was the old phone booths where you had to put lira coins in these phone booths. Now we have to figure out how to do a fax. None of us spoke Italian. The ALAT, wasn't with us at nighttime when we're making these phone calls. And when we're trying to record these conversations with a suction cup and a cassette recorder on an Italian phone booth in the middle of Rome. Wasn't very easy. But eventually we find out that Banerjee is going to be in Amsterdam. He gives us instructions to call me at the Ramada Renaissance in Amsterdam. So a couple of days after our last phone call, Banerjee actually goes to Amsterdam, and we make a phone call and we get him at the Ramada Renaissance in the lobby of the hotel on tape. And he drops a bombshell on us and he tells us, I can't come into Italy. And why not? He says, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I said, I would need a visa. It's going to take me 30 days to get a visa to come into Italy. He says, I can't do it. I'll have to meet you somewhere else. He says, maybe if you go to Lake Como. He says, I can take a limousine from Switzerland to Lake Como. He said, maybe I won't get stopped. Now we're just like pulling our hair out. And, this is actually on us. So we didn't know Banerjee was not a U.S. citizen. We didn't know that he would need a visa to get into Italy. So what do we do now? All of us are there in Italy going on 2 weeks, and we can't get this guy to come.
Are you getting pressure to return to the U.S. from headquarters or the L.A. office?
We're checking in with our supervisor. We're telling him everything's going up roses, right? Everything's coming up roses. Everything's just as planned. We're not telling him we have this major issue yet. The next night we have another conversation with Cologne and Banerjee, and Banerjee says, "Listen," he says, "I've got to go to Geneva, Switzerland. I don't want you in Geneva. I can drive over to Zurich. If you can meet me in Zurich," he says, "we'll just talk all you want." He said, "That'd be a great place to meet." And we're thinking to ourselves, how are we going to do this? It took us months to get approval to go to Italy. Now we got to get another foreign country involved and do a request with them to allow us into their country, bring a killer there to record conversations that may or may not happen. Well, we agreed to do it on the phone call between Cologne and Banerjee. And then the next couple of days, we're coming up on the weekend. It was a flurry of faxes and communications back and forth between our office in Rome, our office in Zurich, our headquarters, International Operations Division, our supervisor, and believe it or not, we were able to pull it off. The legat who was in Bern, Switzerland, the legal attaché for the FBI, said, "Okay, I'm going to set it up in Zurich. You're going to meet with the Swiss Zurich cantonal police, and they're going to cooperate with you." And that's what we did. What I didn't tell you is that we had a legitimate passport for Cologne in a fake name. So we actually went to the State Department and said, we need a legitimate passport that we're going to be able to travel to Europe, and we're not going to get stopped. It's just going to be in a fake name. And we got the State Department to actually give us an alias passport for Cologne to use. So that's how he traveled. And the other thing we were able to do, we were able to put a warrant in NCIC that Cologne had become a fugitive, because we knew that Banerjee, he would always say he had friends in the police department and attorneys. We figured, well, what if he went to a police officer and had him run our crime computer at NCIC to check for any warrants? Cologne was going to be a fugitive. And so before we left for Italy, we put a warrant in the system for Cologne under his true name, obviously. We couldn't put it under the alias name because we were never been able to get back into the country. And that's what we did. We had a warrant in NCIC and we had his fake passport.
Do you know if Steve Banerjee ever checked?
We don't know. I think I did run an NCIC offline search when I came back, which tells you who's run NCIC warrants on a particular name. And I don't think it ever came up. It was my recollection. So we all traveled to Zurich, Switzerland, the four of us. And sure enough, one night we meet with this whole team of Swiss police officers, and they pretty much lay down the law. They're very organized, as you know the Swiss are. They're detail oriented, and they pretty much say, "Hey, we don't care about any mafia connections or anybody trying to come kill this guy. We're going to get this job done right, and we're going to record these conversations. And if he comes here, we're going to be on him." And that's what they did. The three of us, not Stefanak, because he knew Banerjee. So we had to put Stefanak in a different hotel. But we got 3 hotel rooms at the City Hotel in Zurich. And we got one for the tech agent, one for Cologne and one for me. Stefanak in a different hotel. They wired up Cologne's hotel room. We didn't even use the services of our tech agent because they said, no, we're using our equipment. They actually looked at some of our equipment, Jerry, and they kind of laughed. They looked at us and said, this is what you guys are using? It was a little bit embarrassing.
That's sad.
Very sad.
The greatest law enforcement agency in the world.
Well, who makes the best watches? The Swiss, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And these guys were great. They wired up Ray's jacket. They put a transmitter in there. And now we wait for Banerjee to arrive. They check the airlines. Sure enough, he's got a flight in from Amsterdam. He flew right from Amsterdam to Zurich. The plan was when he got to Zurich, Cologne was supposed to call him at another hotel to set up a meeting. So there's a conversation where Swiss police tell us Banerjee has arrived. At the airport, they're following him. They're doing surveillance. And these guys are great. I mean, they're changing cars. They're changing license plates on their cars. The surveillance doesn't get blown at all. He goes to the Ramada Renaissance. We call a prearranged time. Banerjee's in the lobby, and he tells Cologne, come see me at the Ramada Renaissance. And then we tell Ray, no, you get him to the room because the room is wired. That's plan A. So he tells Banerjee, no. I came to you. I came all the way to Switzerland. You come to me. Come to the hotel. Tried to lure him to our city hotel, and he wouldn't come. He said, no, meet me at the, I think it was the Hilton or Hyatt. I think it was the Hilton Hotel in Zurich. And, we told Ray, no, get him to the hotel. But Ray couldn't do it. So we had to put Ray in a taxi, send him over to the Hilton Hotel to meet with Banerjee, who was waiting for us. So I hop in the car with the leader of the team. We have to leave Stefanak again and tech agent. We have to leave them back because Stefanak knows Banerjee from the interview. I hop in the car with the head of the Swiss Cantonal Police. I'm trying to monitor everything on the transmitter. Cologne goes in with his jacket. We had told Cologne before we left for the States, try and put a disguise on like you would do if you're being a fugitive. So Cologne put a fake mustache on. He had a beret. He had sprayed some of that Hollywood stuff that you spray in your hair where you turned your hair gray. So he looked pretty good, actually. And we have some pictures of him in the lobby going into this meeting with Banerjee. And he goes in there. He's got his coat on with the wire, sits down. What's the first thing he does when he sits down to have a meal with Banerjee? He takes his coat off. And that's where the recording device is. He takes the coat off and he puts it on the seat next to him. And we can't hear anything but clinking silverware and glasses and plates. So I tell my partner, Eric, the Swiss police officer, I said, let me go in there and see if I can give him some kind of signal to put the jacket back on. So I'm wearing an overcoat, raincoat, whatever it is. And I go in there and I stand by the entrance to the restaurant. And I've kind of got a direct line of vision with them. And I take my coat on and off about 2 or 3 times. He doesn't get it. I go back out to the car. I said, hey, we got to get this conversation on tape. He goes, okay, leave it up to us. The Swiss police go in. They tell the maitre d', close down the restaurant, make up whatever reason you have to do to close down the restaurant. And there was only a few people in there besides us. So they actually closed down the restaurant.
What time of the day is this?
It's about 9 p.m. They close it down. They say, sorry, we're closing for the evening. Please settle up your bill and whatever. So Cologne tells them, okay, let's go back to my hotel room. So Banerjee says, no, let's go into the bar area. And that's what they do. And they go into the bar area. And let me explain this to your audience. If you ever try and record a conversation in a bar, the acoustics are the worst. There's chitter chatter from all the tables surrounding you. There's the waiters. There's music. There's a piano playing in the background the whole time. So it was very hard. I could hear snippets of it. It was very hard to hear. And they stay in there probably for about 2 hours, hour and a half. Finally, Cologne's able to get him, hey, let's go back to my hotel room. And that's what he does. So Cologne hops in a cab, heads back there. We race back. We have to strip all the recording devices out of the jacket in case Banerjee decides to search it. We get in there. The surveillance is on Banerjee, so we know he's showing up. And sure enough, he shows up outside the hotel, and he comes in to Cologne's room. And Jerry, they did such a great job with the recording in that room. It sounded like a recording studio. It was crystal clear. You could hear a pin drop. And they talked for about 3 more hours. And Ray did a masterful job of just trying to put Banerjee at ease. I mean, Banerjee was a very, very paranoid person. In fact, on one of the times he tells Cologne, he says, what if Stefanak and his wife are next door in a hotel room on vacation? He said, what if they see you? What if they see me? They're going to know something suspicious. Ray would just tell him, are you crazy? Just relax. He said, they know nothing about the D. And that's how they would refer to the Durham murder. And Banerjee would ask him, do they know that I gave you the money for the D? And that's what we needed to hear. Do they know I'm involved in the D? Banerjee asked him, can I get the death penalty for the D? And Cologne told, no, there's no death penalty. It's a federal case. There's no death penalty. He would make up whatever he had to make up to put Banerjee at ease. So at one point during this 3-hour conversation, the phone rings in Cologne's room. So we hear Cologne from the other room because we have the room wired and transmitting. And we hear Cologne on phone go, no, nobody here by that name. No, wrong number. Hangs up. And they continue to talk. And all of a sudden Banerjee goes, who is that on the phone? And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, nobody knows you're here. Who would be calling the room? He goes, oh, it was just a wrong number. Turns out it was my supervisor calling from the States. He called all 3 rooms that we had. He got the tech agent's room. He got Stefanak, who wasn't in his room. Stefanak was actually, at this point, was in my room, hiding. He got Cologne's room, and then he called my room. And I said, hey, we can't talk. We're in the middle of something. I'll call you, give you an update when we can. And I hung up on him.
When he called Cologne's room, who did he ask for?
I don't know who he asked for. I don't know if he asked for Scott, Andy, or whatever.
That would have been really bad if he had asked for Stefanak by his name. I mean,
and then Banerjee would have overheard it. I know. Well, and then you would hear Cologne. He would tell Banerjee, listen, these walls are so thick you can't hear anything in these rooms. But Ray was a character, king of the one-liners. He told Banerjee, this room is so small, the mice walk hunchback, and it was a little tiny room, so they were really on top of one another. Like Ray would order beer, and he would order wine for Banerjee, and the guy would come to the door. The person delivering the beer, Banerjee would run in the bathroom and hide. I don't want anybody to see me in here. What if that's an undercover FBI agent delivering the beer? Ultimate paranoia that you could have, he had.
For a reason, though.
For reason, right. He knew Ray had pled guilty, but he knew Ray Cologne was the only person on the planet that could connect him to all these crimes, right?
And I guess that's the other thing. So many people don't understand the FBI's international reach, that I'm surprised that he even suspected that the FBI could be there in Switzerland, which of course they were, because most people don't associate the FBI, to overseas law enforcement.
And Cologne would tell him as such, but then he would say, well, what if Stefanak's on vacation and just happens to, see me and see you? His mind would just work in all these crazy ways. But we got what we needed. We got conversation about De Noia. We got conversation about the Adonis solicitation for murder, the doctor and his 12-year-old son, the choreographer, the 2 dancers. They talked a little bit about the arson. So we had everything that we needed. And then before he leaves, Banerjee goes down to the car, comes back up with a package and gives him $7,000 and says, I'll come see you whenever you want. I'm in Europe all the time with the Chippendales. And Cologne said, okay, he says, I don't know where I'm going to go. He said, I may go to Spain. He said, but I'll let you know. And they came up with a way to talk in the future, via fax and, let's change code names. And we got it all on tape, got everything we needed. The next morning, Banerjee calls Cologne. Banerjee's on the road. The Swiss police follow him in his rental. He was in a rental Mercedes. They follow him out of town. He's on the road to Geneva because he had told Cologne he was going to Geneva. The next morning, he calls Cologne and he tries to get Cologne to come see him in Geneva. I don't know what that was about. I don't know if he wanted to give him more money or what. But Cologne says, I can't do that. I've already come to see you once. I got to go back to Rome. I was kind of mad at Cologne a little bit. He said, do you need money? And Cologne said, no, I don't need money. Banerjee actually gave him $7,000, but he probably had a lot more in the car. But Banerjee, being all about the dollar, only gave him, a few $1,000s to hold him over, I guess, for another couple of months. Given him, at this point now, it's $250,000 that he had paid Cologne. So that was the end of almost the end of the covert part of the investigation. We had everything we needed. We go back to the States. Of course, headquarters wants us now to put Cologne back into prison, but now we're done with him. We said, no, we're not going to do that. And we can't really have Cologne at his house, because what if Banerjee goes by and tries to, has somebody, private investigator, following Cologne from his house? We can't. Cologne's supposed to be in Europe. So we actually send Cologne to New York for a few months. We need him out of prison because now we have to transcribe all these conversations. We have 5 hours of conversation. We recorded it in Zurich. We have the tapes from Rivera, hours and hours of conversation with Rivera. We have to transcribe all these conversations into written format. And we need Ray to proofread these. So we needed them out of prison. So we stashed them in New York probably for about 7-8 months until we arrested Banerjee. And we did the grand jury, presented our evidence to the grand jury. We consulted again with NYPD. We had been consulting with NYPD all along. Rivera's locked up in a federal detention center or federal prison for his immigration violations. We arrest Banerjee in September of 93, and Ray doesn't get sentenced until our trial is going to be in 94, so we leave Ray out. Early 1994, NYPD goes out to visit Louis Rivera in prison. He confesses to the murder. So now we got a confession from Rivera. And September of 1994, Banerjee decides to plead guilty to a RICO count. For your audience benefit, RICO is Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization. What we charged them with was using the Chippendales business as a criminal enterprise. Either the profits from Chippendales were used to commit crimes, or the business was being run as a criminal enterprise. And that's how the mafia was taken down by the use of the RICO statute. But we use it in this case as using Chippendales as a corrupt organization. And we charge them with that.
And does that take care of all of the violations, not just the murder, but also the attempted arsons and the attempted murder?
This is what happened. RICO, well, it's been a while, but RICO, you only need 2 overt acts. That means 2 acts to further the conspiracy. And I think one has to be, I may have this backwards a little bit. One has to be within 10 years and one has to be within 5 years, right? So all they needed to charge him with, this was 1993. 94 is when he pled guilty. So they did what they call a superseding indictment, because the original indictment charged him with everything. Stefanak and I were not happy about this, but the plea agreement that they worked out with Banerjee was they only were going to let him plead to the 1987 De Noia murder and the 1984 arson of the Red Onion. So the actual Donis conspiracy in 91 wasn't charged, so he didn't plead to that. Nor did he plead to the 1979 arson or the other solicitations for murder on the doctor and on the choreographer. So honestly, Stefanak and I were a little upset with the plea agreement, because the exchange for a 26-year plea agreement, he only had to plead to those 2 things. And I felt like we had such a great case, we should take it to trial, charge him with everything, get him life. Under RICO, you could have gotten life. So we were so annoyed that we didn't even attend the plea agreement in court that day. We were a little bit upset with the prosecutors, but prosecutors probably will write about it. Cologne, besides having his systolic kidney he had a heart attack. He was not in the best condition. They were figuring that, what if he didn't make it to trial time? So they thought this was, even though we had a rock solid case, they thought this was probably the best deal. Banerjee was probably 50, maybe 56 years old, 57 years old around that time. So he was pleading to 26. You don't get parole in federal court, so you have to do like 85%. Probably would die in prison. So while he's locked up in prison from September of 93 till he pleads in about September of 94, we find out that he plots against Cologne. He tries to have Cologne killed. We find that another cooperator from another agent on our squad, that he had been approached by Banerjee to have Cologne killed while Banerjee is locked up. At this point, we decide, okay, we really got to make sure we take care of Ray. So, he's in New York. Everything's fine. Banerjee goes to go to court and be sentenced October of 94. Part of the deal with RICO is that it has a forfeiture provision to it. So by him pleading guilty, we were actually going to seize the Chippendales business, and the government was going to wind up owning Chippendales as part of the plea agreement with him. October, I think it was 28, maybe, don't quote me, 1994, I get a call in the morning from the Metropolitan Detention Center. They had found Banerjee. He had hung himself the night before he was going to be sentenced in court. He had killed himself. What that does is, if you don't go to court and get sentenced, you're not actually convicted. And because there is no actual conviction, there's no forfeiture. So the business wound up going to his wife, because she was the beneficiary.
Think he was aware of that, and that's why he
absolutely.
did it?
Yeah, absolutely. He had told Cologne that he wasn't going to go to prison. He had told Cologne that, he would kill himself. And there was this conversation back and forth. Why would you kill yourself? Why don't you just, go to India or something like that? He said, no. He said, just the shame I'd bring on my family. He said, I can't go to jail. I can't go to prison. Plus, he had served almost a year locked up at the Metropolitan Detention Center. So he had a little bit of a taste of what his next 25 years of his 26-year sentence was going to be like. He had a high-powered defense attorney. I'm sure there was discussions that the forfeiture of the business would wreck his family. That was his family's, let's say, legacy, for lack of a better word, I guess. I mean, his family would inherit all that money. I'm sure he knew what he was doing by killing himself that morning, because it was the morning he was going to be sentenced. He already pled guilty a month before while we waited for the pretrial report, sentencing report. And so he knew the morning of that this was his last chance. He was in a cell by himself. He ripped up some bed sheets and he tied one end to a hook that you use to dry your towels in your cell. And he put the other end around his neck and he hung himself. That was the end of that end of the investigation. Now we still have Cologne to be dealt with, and we still have Louis Rivera, who was charged in New York for murder. Even though he confessed, there's still an outstanding charge on him. New York also charged Banerjee for murder, but part of the plea agreement was that New York district attorney would drop their charges against him in exchange for Banerjee's plea to the federal charges. So we decided at this point it was probably best for Ray to start serving his sentence. This was the end of 94, early 95. Stefanak and I flew Ray down. He went to the Springfield Medical Center in Missouri. We flew him down there and delivered him to start serving his prison sentence. He wound up pleading to 30 months, where he could have gotten 10 years. He had already served almost a year. So he had probably, with good time, probably had a little less than 2 years to do. The trial in New York State Court for the Rivera was set for June of 96. So you're talking about a year and a half between the time Ray goes away, the end of the investigation. So, I continue with our other squad duties, other cases. I worked undercover for about a year. And then in June of 96, we wound up going to New York and having a state murder trial. We have the confession that NYPD was able to get, but still we have to pick Ray up at the medical center in Springfield, bring him to New York. At this point, both his kidneys were shot. So we would have to take him for dialysis 3 times a week. We were in New York probably for about 6 weeks that summer. Rivera winds up taking a stand, believe it or not, in his defense. I guess he figures this is his only shot. And he concocts a story that all the stuff you heard on tape, it was all a movie that Cologne was writing. It was just acting out scenes from a movie. Obviously, the jury didn't buy that. And so he was convicted at the end of the trial, and he was sentenced 25 years to life. He went up going to Attica, and he died in prison in 2012. Ray passed away 2002. He had heart failure, kidney failure. Stefanak passed away 2019. One of the prosecutors, our main prosecutor on the case, passed away 2020. Everyone's pretty much gone on this case.
Yeah, and the Chippendales continued on. So
the wife inherited the business. She wound up getting everything. A few years later, she passed away as well from cancer. Kind of a weird twist at the end was Banerjee was actually related to an FBI agent in our office at this time through marriage. And that agent, who was a fantastic person, by the way, had nothing to do with the investigation, just a great guy, above and beyond reproach. He wound up taking custody of Banerjee's children, and because the sisters, Banerjee's wife and his wife, were sisters. And so in some weird way, he actually, I'm assuming, inherited part of the business, and the business was sold eventually to some other people and continues on to this day.
Wow. This case has had so many twists and turns.
Like a pretzel, Jerry.
That's a surprise ending. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Before we go to the next part where we learn a little bit more about you, would you like to say anything about your former partner, Andrew Stefanak? Yeah,
he was just a great guy. They used to joke on the squad. They called us father and son. We were thick as thieves. I worked from the moment I got on that squad to 91 to 97. We were just great friends. Stayed very friendly until the very end. Passed in July of 2019. And he was about 81 years old, I think, at the time. He wasn't one of these guys that treated the new agents like garbage or crap, and he was a good mentor. Just a great learning experience for me and a great guy to be partnered up with. But it was a great squad. Everybody on that squad was great.
All right. This is the time where, we get to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to ask you my standard question, which is, when did you join the FBI and why did you join the FBI?
So I joined June 5th of 1988, and I joined the FBI, Jerry. When I was growing up in the Bronx, I always wanted to be NYPD. And I had images of the NYPD guys, cops, walking the beat, swinging their nightsticks. And I said, that's what I'm going to do when I get old. I used to work in a grocery store when I was a young kid. Eventually, after high school in the Bronx, I came out to Los Angeles. I went to school, college and law school here. And for a brief moment, I thought, man, instead of being a cop, maybe I'll be a doctor. I wasn't really sure, but I still had this desire in me to be in law enforcement. And after 1/4 of math and science, that's not for me. Let me look into the FBI. My dad, who was not in law enforcement, they used to call him G-Man. And growing up, the G-Men were the FBI, right? Growing up in New York in the 60s and 70s, you'll see them on TV, busting the mafia, whatever it was. And so I called the recruiter at the LA office, and he said, this is how you get in. Law, accounting, foreign language, science and engineering, or the modified diversified method. So I started taking German, accounting. Eventually I went to law school. My dad said, you're an Italian from the Bronx. Maybe a little hard for you to get in. So I hedged my bets. I said, if I don't get in, I'll be a prosecutor. Well, I applied at the beginning of my last year of law school, third year, and by February I was accepted. And the day commencement exercises for my law school, I was on a plane to Quantico.
All right. So you've been retired now for 2 years. So what are you doing now?
As you know, at the FBI, 57 is your date you're forced to retire, right? Your expiration date, I guess. So right when I was turning 57, I applied for an extension because we can extend 3 one-year terms. So I applied. I got my first extension. And then in the summer of 2019, I was trying to figure out what to do. I knew I had to retire. I wanted to work for about 5 more years. I have a young daughter. And so I started looking at job offers. And then out of the blue, I get a call from this author. And all I will say is that he's written a book about the FBI, and he wanted me to do a podcast with him about it, a certain topic, nothing to do, not competing with you. And I said, well, yeah, that's interesting, but it's not something I'm going to do while I'm working. Maybe if I retire, we'll talk about it. And then a friend of mine who is in the entertainment industry called me and said, hey, I sold this show and I'm looking for a tech advisor. I'll send you the script. So I read the script, great script. It's a show called All Rise. And it was about a state court judge and the state court system. I said, it's not really in my wheelhouse being an FBI agent, even though we're working fugitives for 2 decades. I probably did more state court cases than anything. He said, well, I know the executive producers of a new show called FBI Most Wanted. It was a show about an FBI fugitive team.
Yeah, definitely that one was in your wheelhouse.
that one was right in my wheelhouse. So I went and met the executive producer. He pretty much said, when can you start? He said, we need somebody desperately. He says, by the way, he says, the other show, FBI, which is the first show in the series, they need one as well. So I went and talked to that executive producer. When can you start? And this was like August of 2019. I said, well, I have to retire. We can't have additional employment as we're working as FBI agents. It's just one of the rules. I said, well, maybe this is a sign, right? All these opportunities came up at once. I said, I talked to my wife. I said, this is probably the time to retire. Honestly, Jerry, if the FBI would tell me you could work till 65, I would have stayed till 65 working fugitives. I was having so much fun. Just a great environment. I got to live out almost my dream of being a local police officer because I worked on a task force with the LAPD for 20-something years. So I had the best of both worlds. So I pulled the plug and retired September of 2019. And I started becoming a technical advisor on all those shows. And then right around that time, I was called from another executive producer. They were doing a show about Clarice Starling, the hero of Silence of the Lambs. They were trying to sell a show about that. And the show takes place in 1993. And that's right around the time I was a young FBI agent working cases. So I became the tech advisor on Clarice, another show on CBS. And that's what I've been doing.
So I like to end each episode giving my guest the last word. So what would you like to say?
Wrapping up on this Chippendales case, Jerry, I think what made this case was the rapport we established with our cooperating witness. I tried in my career, to be kind to everybody I met as an FBI agent, because oftentimes you're the first and only person they will meet as a representative of the FBI. And it's probably going to stick ingrained in their mind. And thinking out of the box. And that's what I always like to pride myself, thinking out of the box in a way to solve a problem. I think those rules also apply to everyday life. Solve a lot of problems that way.
And that's the end of the interview. At jerrywilliams.com and the episode's show notes, you'll find a photo of Scott Garriola. Scott also shares some personal photos from his investigation, and there are also links to news articles about the Chippendale murder for hire case. I, of course, had to include some photos of Chippendale dancers. I hope you enjoyed the episode and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. If they're not sure how to listen to a podcast, have them read the post on my website, How to Listen to a Podcast. And don't forget to follow FBI Retired Case File Review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to audio. I would also love it if you checked out the link for my books in your podcast app's description of this episode. My nonfiction books, FBI Myths and Misconceptions, a manual for armchair detectives, which goes through 20 cliches and misconceptions about the FBI in books, TV, and movies. And then there's the companion book, FBI Word Search Puzzles, Fun for Armchair Detectives. My FBI Philadelphia Corruption Squad crime series features flawed female FBI agent Carrie Wheeler. All of my books are available wherever books are sold as ebooks, print books, and audiobooks. If you've already picked up copies of my books, please consider leaving a review. Reviews help readers find good books. Thank you for listening to the very end, and I hope you come back again for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.